In the past 12 months, Huawei has gone from being that one company that made great hardware but could never seem to get the software right, to being able to legitimately compete with more established brands. So in 2017, the new P10 phones are tasked with building on that momentum while also competing with what's to come from Samsung and Apple. So let's see how these things measure up. This is our review of the Huawei P10 and P10 Plus. Huawei's new phone comes in two sizes and a bunch of different colours and finishes. There's the standard 5.1-inch P10 and a 5.5-inch P10 Plus, which brings with it some modestly upgraded specs. These are both curvy ergonomic phones, and yes, in certain colours the P10 bears more than a passing resemblance to the iPhone, especially with those curved antenna bands top and bottom. You've got a choice between a standard anodized paint job, a high gloss coat, and this unique hyper diamond cut finish that looks and feels unlike any other texture I've seen on a phone. The finely cut mesh pattern comes out a little weird on camera, but it also catches the light like nothing else, and leaves all my other metal phones looking rather plain and envious. On the dazzling blue P10 I'm using here, this contrasts nicely with the polished sides. If you have a choice, this is absolutely the colour to get in my opinion. Just beware of chipping away at that anodized blue finish if it gets scratched. Beyond the texture, the P10's design is uncomplicated but stylish, with no front-facing branding of any kind, nor any outlandishly thin sidewalls. While there are two different phones here, they're built around a very similar hardware platform. That's Huawei's Kirin 960 chip, just as we saw in the Mate 9, which has plenty of power for lightning-quick app performance in gaming. And you also get a camera that's basically identical to the Mate 9's, though with some upgrades in the P10 Plus that I'll get to later. So besides the very obvious size differences, the jump from P10 to P10 Plus gets you a higher res screen, Quad HD versus 1080p, and the option to spec it out with up to 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. The standard P10 is 4 plus 64, which frankly is probably enough for most people, but more is always better. The displays themselves look great, more than bright enough with vibrant colours that lean a little on the cool side. But here's where we get to the one major compromise with these phones that just might be a deal breaker for you. The P10s have factory fitted screen protectors, which many phones do, but there's no oleophobic coating on the glass beneath. That's the smudge resistant layer that most phones have that stops it getting gunked up. So whatever you do, don't take that screen protector off unless you want to experience everything on this phone through a haze of greasy fingerprints. Anyway, it's a really weird decision for such an expensive phone, and like I said, I couldn't blame you if you passed on the P10 entirely because of it. Still here? Good, because there's actually quite a lot to like about the P10 even despite this. As well as super fast performance and excellent build quality, the phone has a phenomenal fingerprint sensor, extremely quick and accurate, and for what it's worth now relocated around the front. And this lets Huawei offer an additional way to get around Android besides the traditional software keys. You can free up screen space using the fingerprint scanner as a kind of gesture area, tapping once for back, long pressing for home, and swiping to see recent apps. The idea isn't necessarily a bad one, although I'm not sure why it's supposed to be any better than just using capacitive keys. It's not like there isn't room down there on the bottom bezel. My biggest issue is that the swipe gesture routinely failed to register, so I just ended up switching back to the regular soft keys. Anyway, this is one of a few new features in Huawei's EMUI 5.1 software based on Android Nougat. There aren't really any visual changes compared to the slightly older EMUI 5.0, instead Huawei tells me it's mostly about tuning up performance, especially touch responsiveness, which makes a big difference to how fast a phone feels. And yes, these phones absolutely feel fast. It's tough to say whether they're noticeably any quicker than the Mate 9, but they're certainly up there with the speediest Android phones around. Using the P10 is a lot like using a miniature Mate 9. The software is 99% the same as that phone. It's still very differentiated though compared to other Android manufacturers. If you're used to the way Samsung, LG and Google do things, it's going to take a bit of getting used to. But once you're settled in, you'll appreciate the clean visuals of most of Huawei's apps, the general lack of clutter, and the ease with which you can shake all of that up with some themes. Take a look at our Huawei Mate 9 review video for more on some of the changes in EMUI 5. Huawei has a well-deserved reputation for battery life, and the P10's longevity lives up to this promise. There's a 3200 mAh cell in the smaller P10, and an enormous 3750 mAh in its big brother. That means you'll easily get through a full day on the small P10, and perhaps more than that on the Plus. And assuming you have the right combination of cables and plugs, Huawei's supercharged technology can bring a dead P10 back to life in record time, charging it up to 5 amps for quicker refills with less heat. The camera setup is where these two phones really diverge. On the small P10 you basically have the Mate 9's camera, only packed in a smaller space, with an optically stabilised 12MP shooter for colour and a secondary 20MP monochrome shooter for details, both behind f2.2 lenses. The main lens camera is basically a known quantity at this point. Again, check out our review for more on that phone, a detailed breakdown. But in brief, it is surprisingly good, if a little lacking in low light compared to the Google Pixels and iPhones of the world. The P10 Plus has all the same sensors but behind f1.8 lenses, meaning both can suck in more light for improved performance in darker conditions. And the results really are impressive. The P10 Plus is one of the most versatile Android cameras I've used, with low light performance almost as good as the Pixel, and it also benefits from some unique artistic modes like monochrome and low depth of field. Both phones have a new photographic trick up their sleeves in the form of portrait mode, which works a lot like the same feature on the iPhone 7 Plus, zooming in slightly, defocusing the background and intelligently relighting your subject's face to bring out certain colours. Works great on human subjects, not so much on non-humans. So overall, I can recommend the Huawei P10 and P10 Plus, but it's kind of a grudging recommendation, with a big asterisk hanging over it. The situation with the screen lacking a smudge-resistant layer is unfortunate, and a really significant black mark against these phones. Frankly, when you're paying flagship prices, you should expect to have a basic feature like an oleophobic coating. But if you can get past that and use the P10 with its factory-fitted screen protector, you'll be getting a really fantastic phone. One with great performance, a top-tier camera, and dependable battery life. The P10 Plus in particular, with its upgraded camera and ludicrous amount of memory, is a huge achievement for Huawei. It's just a shame to see the company take this step backwards after taking such a huge leap forwards. Check out my written review for more on the P10, and subscribe so you don't miss any more reviews as they land. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.